All right, what's going on? Today's episode is hands down one of my most important ones. It's the 10 biggest training mistakes that I personally made that you guys can learn from. Now, I put mistakes in quotation marks because technically they're not mistakes, it's trial and error from my personal journey. And if I didn't have to go through these, then I wouldn't be making this video right now and you guys wouldn't be learning from my experiences. So at the same time, it was worth it in a sense because now I know the newer generation of lifters or even people who are still lifting right now will benefit and they won't have to repeat the same muscle building mistakes I made. So without further ado, let's get into it. Also, if you're the type of person who comes to the gym, you're doing a shrug for instance, and as opposed to going all the way up, you're doing like half shrugs on a lift that already has a small range of motion, you would benefit more from a full range. And the same thing can apply to rows as well. If you're gonna stand, it's called a bent over row for a reason. I understand there's Yates rows, but even Yates rows are bent over to a certain extent. If you're literally standing up on a row, if you're literally standing, it's not a bent over row, it's basically a hybrid of a row and a shrug. So you're better off setting up like an RDL, you push your hips all the way back, okay? Get some range of motion in there. Get some scapular movement, get some retraction, get some protraction, and you'll get way more out of it. So that's hands down one of the biggest ones. Even today, I don't think I do any partials in my training right now. The only partial I could really think of is when I do my mechanical drop set for my lateral raises. I'll start off with heavier dumbbells here, and then I'll go lighter dumbbells, full range, because I personally feel it more in my shoulders. But besides that, I don't do any partials for the most part. So that makes me transition to the next part while we're here. It's cheat reps. Not only was I using a lot of partials and cutting range, but I was also using a lot of cheat reps as well. And that was a huge mistake because in the majority of cases, momentum kills gains. If we're trying to build as much muscle mass as possible. We're not trying to just throw weights around. We're not trying to get weights from point A to point B. It's also about how you get it there. And if you're using secondary or third muscles to get the job done, and you're working every muscle in your body except the target muscle, it's not worth it. And one of the biggest culprits is the rows. A lot of people, I understand a little bit of body English, that's perfectly fine. But if we're talking about turning the lift into a horizontal power clean, it's not worth it. So, like I showed you for the rows, I understand as it gets heavier, it's okay to start using a little bit of sway. But if your rows look like this, where you're just ducking under it, and you're meeting the weight halfway, it's not worth it. So that's another one. And the same thing can apply to pull downs as well. If your pull down, if your torso angle is around 45 degrees, and at the bottom of the rep, you're leaning all the way back, using way too much momentum. So keep that in mind. Okay, so next this ties into the upper traps versus the lower traps. Back in the day, I was prioritizing my upper traps way too much, prioritizing my neck way too much, but I wasn't doing any kind of work for my lower traps. And this basically led to a lot of problems that create a lot of imbalances in my body. And if you have underdeveloped lower traps, what's gonna happen, especially on incline and overhead work, is you're gonna tend to flare your elbows a lot, you're gonna tend to shrug a lot, and your shoulders are gonna go very forward. So if you have lower traps, it's gonna aid in scapular depression, and it's gonna help maintain scapular control, so you're gonna have better presses and you're gonna have healthier shoulders. So keep in mind, a lot of people are already shrugged to begin with, and you're exacerbating that problem by just doing more trap work. Could you still do your shrugs? 100%. But what I'm saying is don't neglect your lower traps. And one of the best exercises to actually isolate the lower traps is the Y raise. And you could actually do this as your shoulder warm-up. This is hands down one of the best ways to do it. You don't even have to do it at the end of the workout midway. Just warm up with the Y raise. You're gonna get some side delts in there. You can get some lower traps. You're gonna feel stronger on your presses, and the benefits are endless. So all you need to do is you could go on a cable station. Simply grab cables like this, do a Y. Like that. So, great for the lower trap. You could also do Y raises unilateral as well. Okay? Keep in mind the lower traps are smaller muscles, so this really isolates them. And one of my favorite ways to do it personally, shout out to Nick Gloff, is on the floor. You get way better stability this way. Like this. This is how I personally do them. I warm up with the Y raise on the floor. The loading potential is still decent. Your shoulders are gonna feel much better, especially when you go to press. I personally start all my upper body workouts with the Y raise. I do less direct trap work. My shoulders never felt better. Another big mistake I personally made was neglecting machines. So I personally always use machines, but I didn't have that many machines in my program. Maybe I had like a chest supported T-bar row if my gym had it, but I was more of the free weight guy, you know, barbells, body weight, dumbbells, barely even using cables either. But I've really changed my mind about that in the last couple of years because machines basically create certain constraints to put your body in the position you want to be in with the added extra external stability so you get more output on the muscle. So we're not training for the circus, you know, we're not training for balance, we're trying to train to get output on the muscle, and that's what's gonna help build more tissue. And an exercise like the horizontal hack squat, my gym doesn't have a regular hack, but we got the horizontal one, very solid. This feels like a stable safety bar squat. I still do safety bar squat, but this is my secondary lift when I do my legs. And this feels amazing because you're locked in. I have back support, I have head support, I have handles. I could play around with my feet. So I can put my feet forward, back, which is a luxury that you don't have on a regular squat. You can only put them laterally. Here you could go up and down, so you have more options for different individuals, especially different clients in my case. And you're extremely stable. So, luckily, with what we know now, machines are making more of a comeback in the lifting community. A lot of people are starting to understand the benefits of machines. More gyms are purchasing more machines. More individuals who weren't using machines before are using them more now because they see the benefits. But keep in mind, one thing I will mention, I was gonna make a separate video about this, but while we're on the topic, a lot of people will use machines and they understand that there's benefits such as external stability, but they don't go to absolute failure. So keep in mind that because of all these added benefits you have to push the sets harder to reach failure. So for example, if I was doing a safety bar squat, if the last rep would be very sketchy where I feel like I would fail it, I probably won't even attempt it. Whereas on a hack or a lift like this with more external stability, I probably would attempt it because I'm more stable. So the chances of injury are slightly less on the machine. So not only was I not doing lower trap training, but I also wasn't doing much for my serratus anterior. And for those who don't already know, this is an essential muscle which basically aids in protraction. And why is protraction important, you may ask? This basically gives you more movement options in the shoulders. So you always hear in the fitness world, shoulders down and back. But you also want to have access to this because protraction is correlated with overhead mobility. So if you're always shoulders down and back, and you try to get your arms overhead, you're gonna feel more restricted. But if I tell you to protract your shoulders, you're gonna have more movement options, more availability. Now, I'm not saying that you have to do a lot of serratus exercises. You could actually incorporate serratus techniques, if you will, into some lifts you're already doing. So for example, if you're doing a basic push-up, as opposed to keeping your scaps pinned back, you could actually reach at the top. So to give you an example, most people, they start the push-up like this, and their shoulders are already in the retracted position. If you reach, like so, and now you go down in your push-up, and you end here, as opposed to here, you could sneak in more serratus, and your shoulder's gonna feel that much better about it. Your overhead mobility is gonna feel better. Overhead mobility feels better. Now you're overhead pressing more for a longer duration of time, and you're gonna have access to higher degrees of it. So don't skip your serratus work. And there's also exercises you could do, such as spider crawls with the mini band where you go against a wall, and you reach, you just crawl like so. That's gonna help with the serratus as well. So next is pause reps. If you guys have noticed in my training within the last year, at least 2 years or so, most of my lifts are done paused. I own the end ranges, so I'll pause the bottom and I'll pause the top. I do this to standardize my repetitions, but I also do it to limit the loading exposure, so I get more out of less weight. And also, this is a great way to improve your form, because your form's not gonna get better by bouncing weights off your chest or just using sloppy technique. And the best way to reinforce that for myself, for people watching, for my clients, so on and so forth, is to have pause reps. You could also have tempos in the mix as well. That's another topic, but for the sake of this tip, it's pause reps. This has literally revolutionized my training, so as opposed to just bouncing here, I pause right here, I pause right here, right here, right here. Okay? Now I have to say, I'm not against touch and go reps, and I actually do use touch and go reps. And the way I use touch and go reps is if I have a 12-week program, so I basically have 12-week phase A, 12-week phase B. So I have 2 programs I alternate between. In each program, I'll start with everything pause reps, and if I get to, for example, week number 8, and I feel like I'm stalling with the pause reps, I'll add a touch and go. But it's not a bounce and go, it'll literally look like this. So a pause is 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. A touch and go, tap and go is just. So you're not bouncing it, you're just touching the fabric of the shirt and coming back up. Another big mistake was not doing much direct oblique work. So keep in mind, in the fitness world in the last couple of years, people would borderline be demonizing oblique work, saying that it would be bad for your waist because it's gonna make your waist thicker. Whatever the case is, people would say that it's dangerous for your back because if you do lateral flexion, it's not the best thing and you want to do more static, isometric holds for your obliques. But nothing can be further from the truth. The reality is that the obliques are a muscle. You could get them stronger. They're going to help with certain imbalances. If you have, for instance, hip shifts on a squat, if you really tend to lean more towards one side, obliques could potentially help aid that issue. Obliques also help stabilize the spine. They're literally on the outsides of it. So they're gonna make you feel a lot more stable when you're doing your squats, your deadlifts, and even lifts like your presses, you're gonna feel less shifty. So obliques are definitely beneficial, but the reality is that a lot of people don't know many oblique lifts, and that's personally where I was. I didn't know a lot besides basic side planks, maybe side planks with a little rotation, but that's when I took, for example, Angus Bradley, shout out to him. I took his course, started learning more about biomechanics, and I learned about the bodyweight side bend. So it's a great exercise right here that you could literally load. So you could just go on a bench like so. If it's uncomfortable for your hand, you could take like a shirt or a half roller like this. So I'm working in this plane right here, and this is working my obliques big time. Moving your body through space. This will already be very challenging to some people, but to those who it's not, you could add load. And I found the best way to do that is with a chain. So you can get your obliques very strong by simply putting this on your oblique. You could hold it for extra stability. And like so. So, if you want to feel a lot more mobile, you want to feel less stiff, it's all about getting more movement options in the torso. And the obliques are a great place to start. So, a lot of people, if you ask them, for example, to laterally flex, they're going to do this. They're stiff. If you ask me to bend laterally, I can move my hips to the side. So, shout out to Greg Stern for that. So, this is why oblique training, or at least in the form of side bends, doing some form of oblique training is important, and this is why I incorporate it into my program. And you don't have to do that much either. You can do the minimum dose of effectiveness, and it'll get you a lot further. Big one as well, and this actually led to some imbalances I have in my hand. It's over-reliance on straps and not doing enough direct grip work. So from as long as I can remember, I've always been using straps a lot on a lot of different exercises for a lot of sets, a lot of different rep ranges, and I wouldn't do much strapless work. And that actually led to some issues on my end. So what I do now is I don't use straps as much. I still use them, especially on back training, but I don't use them on every set. I do as many warm-up sets as I can without them. and I do more direct grip work. So the form of grip work I actually use for direct grip work, I really like plate pinches. You could hold these for 60 to 90 seconds. And when it gets easy, you could simply take another plate, you put it between, and that'll make it a lot harder. But this is actually gonna work the thumb, which is a lazy part of the hand for some people. For a lot of people, that thumb is just dangling around and it's not actually doing any work. So this is why you could get it active as well and really start clawing your weights a lot more, get a stronger grip. Some of my older videos as well, the way I'd be holding on to weights was not helping my situation either. So not only was I relying on the straps, when I would be using no straps, the way I'd be holding the weight would be like so. So if I'd be doing a hammer curl, I wouldn't actually be holding it with my whole hand, it would be the top of my hand. So technically my hand can't even be wrapped and I would still be holding it. So I would hold my hammer curls like this, especially as it would get heavier. And this is not aiding me in getting stronger grip. So what I do now, hold it really in the middle of the knob, do my hammer curls like that. You could go heavier if you do it like this, but I don't want to have those issues with my hands, so I personally hold in the middle. So I was holding it more on the thumb side, and the same thing can be applied by my overhead extensions. I was not holding it like this. I was holding it with the pinky side. So if you do that for year on year on year, it's going to create some imbalances because eventually it's like you're not really holding weights at all. You're using straps a lot of the time, and when you're not using the straps, you're holding it more on the thumb side. If you're doing, for example, walking lunges, you're doing farmer walks and it starts getting heavy, you just do this. So eventually your hands are going to be behind the rest of your body. So that's why it's important to have some direct grip work in, limit the use of straps, still use them when it's appropriate, but make sure you still have a strong grip. Next is direct adductor work. So this is extremely important, and this is actually one of the biggest parts of the thigh that a lot of people don't train, they don't pay attention to it. There's 4 heads of the quads, there's 4 heads of the adductors. And why are adductors important, you may ask? Adductors will help you with improved hip extension. Adductors will help you in the frontal plane, they'll help you with lateral sports if you're playing stuff like tennis, you know, even if you're a lifter and you play, for example, volleyball on the beach one day, you don't want to just tear a groin. You want to make sure you have strong adductors. They're also going to help you have healthier knees, have healthier hips. They're going to carry over to squats and deadlifts. If you happen to be a wide stance squatter and you don't do any direct adductor work, you don't want to tear anything, so it's good to have your bases covered. A lot of people, they do isolation work for calves, they do it for hamstrings, for quads, but for adductors, they don't do anything. So this is hands down one of the best ways to isolate them, by simply doing the seated adductor machine. So the goal of this is not to train to do the splits, unless that's what you want to do. It's to train your adductors. So you want to get them in a good lengthened position. And I actually started with setting number 7. Now I'm on setting number 8. And this is perfectly fine for me. So you spread your legs, hold on to the handles for tightness. For the first rep, I use my hands, like so. Go right here, grip it tight, and I'm pulling my bum, my glutes into the pad. Pause right here. Pause right here. I work in a higher rep range for these, so I'll do a set of 8 to 10, and I'll do a back down set of 12 to 20 reps. It's not called strength and conditioning for nothing. You have a lot of people doing a lot of strength work with 0 conditioning in the program. They go up a flight of stairs, super tired. Just sitting down and talking to people, they feel tired. So you don't want that. You want to have better heart health. You want to have improved work capacity. You don't want to have to take 5-minute rest periods between every exercise, like a bicep curl. You don't want to feel gassed out. You want to have better performance inside the gym and outside the gym, and this is where the conditioning comes into hand. So I personally do conditioning that's going to help me build muscle as well. So one of my favorite lifts personally, especially at the moment, is dumbbell walking lunges with continuous tension. So as opposed to just doing this, standing up, I'm doing it continuous. So like so, no rest at the top. Long durations for laps. The sets last 2 to 3 minutes. The dumbbells are lighter, but you go one side of the gym, other side, there, back, 2 to 3 times, and you'll do sets of that. So I really like conditioning in the form of walking dumbbell lunges, but I also get my 8 to 10K steps a day in as well, which helps with the low impact aspect of it. My gym is actually getting a sled, and my old gym had a sled too, so I would do a lot of sled pushes, sled pulls on the way back. Lateral sled jogs are great as well for the frontal plane. So exercise like that, and also enjoying it as well, because me walking on a treadmill was never fun. Even ellipticals are pretty boring. Not to say training always has to be fun, but when I do conditioning in this style, more strongman style training, if you will, I personally feel like I get more out of it. It's more of a long-term way to do it, so for me, at least, you know, so don't neglect your conditioning. I have had some periods where I was a bit more sloppy on it. I wouldn't be doing it as much, or I would be doing more, like a couple sets of farmer's walks, but that's not that much conditioning as well. You still want to get it from different aspects. You still want to, you know, go outside, get your steps in. You want to have the whole 9 yards with whatever your recovery could allow. So don't neglect your conditioning. Last but not least, it's doing way too much volume in the gym that I was able to recover from, doing way too much fluff work, and going into the gym to train a muscle where I was just throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it. So many different sets, so many different reps, so many different exercises from different angles, and a lot of it was becoming redundant. So nowadays I'll go into the gym, and if I'm training a muscle or two, max I'll have is maybe 12 to like 17 sets tops. But I was going to the gym before, and even though I was bulking, I was doing close to 30 sets. And a lot of that was junk volume, and that's working sets as well. So if you're doing 30 working sets of maybe 1 or 2 muscles, first of all, the workout's gonna take forever, and by the time you get to like the 15th set, a lot of it you're gonna feel very fatigued and was not ideal in my particular opinion. So these are my top 10 mistakes I personally made. This is my trial and error. These are my experiences. This is my journey. And you guys could have a lot of takeaways from this. The whole video is going to be timestamped, so you could go to whatever part you want. But I recommend you watch till the end. And with that being said, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I hope you guys learned something today. So see you guys soon.